The key lesson, the key teaching for me, and this is what I, share with everyone, is that liberation is about moving into and leaning towards, not running away. Like the more we run away, the more the pain and the suffering just it grows even more intense, right? You keep pushing it away and it just goes off and grows, right? And then finally, when you turn back towards it, it's this huge mountain of pain, and but it's still possible to work with, right? I just feel like the pain and our suffering is full of so much data, so much information that's actually trying to help us. And we just don't necessarily have the support sometimes to really show up and to hold space for the teachings that our pain is trying to share with us. Right. And so when, meditation, for me, meditation early on, for example, was nothing but pain. Now, meditation wasn't painful, but it was the act of paying attention to all this stuff that I'd been trying to push away that felt unbearable. Right. And it took me a while to get past that, to understand that I wasn't creating more suffering for myself. I was just actually for the first time paying attention fully to the suffering and how overwhelming that felt. Right. But no, but there are many other ways that we begin to take care of our pain. Paying attention is the first piece of that. But then there are other practices that we call in that actually helps us to metabolize the pain in general, right? But it takes so much courage to do that. And I understand why, our cultures and our societies, run away from pain and we build and create these really sophisticated methods of like avoiding the pain, which, for, on one hand leads to multiple kinds of addictions, right? And, in other forms, and other kinds of experiences based upon avoiding the pain. Um, but for me, so much of what has supported me to work with these Buddhist methods of working with pain is that um, I just really began to trust early on that turning towards the pain was the way because I was beginning to feel that all my other methods weren't working. It's just like it's just nothing disappeared if I distracted myself from it. It just stayed there. And I was like, finally, I just need to name this and to see this and to take care of it through practice. And of course, that decision has transformed my life completely, and both as an individual, right? And as someone really concerned about the collective, I know that I have to do my part in metabolizing my individual pain in order to do work on behalf of my collective, to metabolize collective pain and trauma as well. What we would traditionally call loving kindness or meta practice is extremely important. And meta practice is really about um, really cultivating a deep sense of care for ourselves. That also becomes the basis of care for others, right? And I really believe that we have to deeply care for ourselves enough to want to be free, like from the suffering, from the trauma. Like we have to deeply believe that we deserve not to suffer in order to deeply engage in these practices. So I called in meta practice, which has been really important for me for many years now. But also for me, yoga was also an important part of my practice, just the work around inviting my body into, you know, liberation, right? Asking my body to participate in this project of like not just movement and asana, but just the ways in which our bodies hold so much trauma and so much suffering. And now for me, yoga became a path of moving this stored energy in my body and loosening it and just like allowing it to flow more freely, and my body, as well as all of our bodies, must be a part of our liberation work together, right? There's no liberation without the body, just as there's no liberation without the mind. both mind and body must be in collaboration, right? So yoga was teaching me early on how to be with my body and how to notice what my body was holding and how to release that energy from my body as well.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, that's also in the trauma work, we would say pretty similar things, and how the trauma can only be released through the body, and we can just think our way through the trauma, but we need all of the uh, aspects that you said are an interplay, and it's beautiful. So when you I heard you say, okay, there is the work that we do individually on ourselves in order to heal ourselves to a certain degree, and then only then we are able to engage in the collective dimension of trauma or pain or wounding or past. So how do you see, what's the vision for like dealing with our collective past? So let's say many of us do our individual work, and I think many people are doing that in different modalities. But how can we move or create the movement towards the collective healing process or the collective liberation?
Yeah, and I think for me, it's really been about abolition, right? Is really being deeply invested in the abolition of any system that perpetuates harm and violence, right? For us and for that, and that's really the source of collective trauma as well as individual trauma. Like we live in a situation where we're being governed and dominated by these systems, right, that restrict or unfairly, give access to certain resources, right, for people. And we have to kind of disrupt that and say, you know what, everyone deserves the resources that they need to be safe and well and happy, right? Not to have more than what you need, but definitely not to have less than what you need, just to have what you need. And for me, that's abolition, that the dream of a liberated future where we all have access to exactly what we need to be well, safe, and happy, right? And free, you know? So we have to start investing in that kind of work together. But another thing too, we have to start really understanding the collaboration of both the seen and unseen worlds, right? And more specifically, I think it's really important that we return to what I often call an indigenous worldview. A worldview that really takes into account that we're living in a sacred ecology, right? That connects, all of these, kinds of realities, both form and formless realities that connect to different kinds of beings across, dimensions and timelines and planes of existence, right? There's much more happening than what I can see or sense or feel. And so everything, as we would say in Buddhism, is interconnected. There's an interrelatedness, right? And for me, sacred ecology is remembering that interrelatedness and that I have to learn to remember and to practice on these different levels of being, you know? I think specifically for Western cultures, right, particularly cultures that are rooted in colonialism, we have to return back to the natural world, right? We have to return back to a really respectful and loving and caring relationship to the earth, to the land, to the beings connected to the land, both seen and unseen. There has to be, much more of a collaboration with the earth instead of a domination of the earth.